All right, it's 5 o'clock. We're gonna start the meeting. I'm chairperson of the Committee of Adjustments. My name is Phil Pocock. The order of today's meeting will be under my direction. All items of the agenda must be acknowledged by me prior to any decisions, presentations, or discussion. When I acknowledge you to speak, you can address me as chair. Please be advised that all proceedings and decisions of this Committee of Adjustments are undertaken without bias or conflict of interest. If there are any conflict of interest, members of the committee, including myself, will declare the conflict either at the beginning of the meeting or may declare prior to the application being heard. All members of the audience that wish to speak will be able to do so when acknowledged by myself in accordance with the published agenda. When invited to speak, please approach the podium at the back of the room, turn on the microphone by pressing the button. Wait a second or two, the microphone will turn on with a blue light before speaking. We ask that all in attendance be respectful and speak about the application at hand only. Any topics or discussions that deviate from the application at hand will not be tolerated. All members of the public that wish to speak will be granted 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes. Please also note that this meeting is being live streamed to the town's YouTube page. I'll now introduce everybody on the committee here. The far left, or far right, sorry, my far right, your left. Matthew Child, committee member. Bill Baker, committee member. Marcia Bukta, planning clerk. Doreen Lester, committee member. Dan Sove, committee member. Lori Chadwick, Director of Development Services. Rita Jabor, Manager of Planning Services. Ian Rawlings, Junior Planner. Cheyenne Mayu, Planning and Heritage Intern. And at the back, Kevin Gerard, I can't read that, Director of Infrastructure Services. And I'm Phil Pocock. And Ian, do you want to do the land acknowledgement?
Sure. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, and of the Huron-Wendat peoples. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial.
Any declaration of conflict of interest? Not seeing anything. Moving to a published agenda. Committee of Adjustment meeting for January 21st. There is some changes, and we're going to move B22, 3222 and B225 to the first on the agenda, and then move down accordingly. Yeah. Good time. Everyone good with that? Motion by Doreen, second by Dan. Okay, committee member or Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes for December 17th, 2024. Moved by Matthew, second by Bill. All good? Yep. All right, application presentation B3222. Ian, go ahead. Do that. It's so used to being Ian.
Mr. Chair, we're just going to give Marcia the opportunity to get us to the right slides, and then we'll begin. Okay, there we are. So our first two applications tonight are for a consent application that was first heard in 2022 and for an easement application that is tied to the severance application. So beginning with B3222, this is an application that concerns the lands located at 14978 14th Concession Road, which is located within the primary settlement area boundaries of Essex Center and at the corner of Pinkerton Road and the 14th Concession Road, which is just southwest of Highway number 3. So on the slide there, you will see that the subject lands are highlighted in yellow, and that is their location. The lands are 13.5 hectares in total lot area. They are designated to accommodate general industrial uses in the Town of Essex official plan. And under the town zoning bylaw, bylaw 1035, the lands have a corresponding zoning designation. They're zoned manufacturing district 2.1, which permits general industrial uses. Now, the lands under the zoning bylaw are also affected by a holding zone restriction, which under the zoning bylaw delays the construction of any buildings or structures on the lands until that hold is lifted. That hold is normally lifted when a property or part of a property is serviced by full municipal services, such as water, sanitary, and stormwater infrastructure, and a development agreement is adopted between the town and the developer as a result of a subdivision or site plan control approval. However, although there's a holding restriction on this property under the zoning bylaw, it does not prohibit the severance of these lands prior to the lifting of that hold. So just west of the subject lands on Pinkerton, there are other lands which are either developed for industrial purposes or are designated for future industrial purposes. And just south of the subject lands is a cemetery. The lands are presently vacant, and there is an existing access off of the 14th Concession Road. Due to the strategic location of these lands, located along major road networks such as Highway number 3 and County Road number 8, and the separation of the lands from more sensitive land uses such as residential uses, this area where the subject lands are located just southwest of Highway number 3 is planned as an employment area for industrial development in the town of Essex. Next slide, please. So as we mentioned earlier, consent application B3222 was previously heard by the previous term of the Committee of Adjustment on November 14th, 2022. And at that time, the only member that is currently sitting on this term of the committee that was there in 2022 is actually Chair Pocock. The number of lots at that time proposed in 2022 was actually the exact same number of lots proposed tonight, being 5 new industrial lots. However, the severance plan at the time was slightly different. The reason why the committee deferred the application in 2022 was mainly because the Conservation Authority, being the Essex Region Conservation Authority, wanted more detailed engineering information on the stormwater strategy for the entire parcel, including information on the intended outlet for the development to confirm that the sizing of the proposed lots was appropriate. So since 2022, the applicants working with the town of Essex and working with the Essex Region Conservation Authority have completed a stormwater management strategy and a functional servicing report. And those plans and reports have detailed the stormwater strategy for this proposal, as well as the intended outlet. They have been reviewed by the town of Essex's infrastructure services staff and the Essex Region Conservation Authority staff, and they have been deemed satisfactory by both parties. As such, the Conservation Authority and the town of Essex have no objections to the proposed severances and the severance plan as will be presented to you tonight. Next slide, please. So beginning with the purpose of this application, it is to create 5 new industrial lots. And on the screen, you will see the lotting layout for the subject lands. You'll see that the lots are numbered 1 through 5. All of the proposed lots will satisfy the minimum lot width and minimum lot area requirements of the town zoning bylaw, and therefore they do not require variances to support the severances. The retained lands are identified, they're outlined in green. All lots have frontage on a public road, being Pinkerton or the 14th Concession Road, but the lots, if created and developed, will actually have access through a private mutual service road that will be established by easement through application B0225. And that proposed mutual access road is highlighted in yellow on the screen before you. I want to note that the road is not a separate lot. Rather, it is part of Lot 3, but will be subject to that right-of-way and that easement for access and water servicing in favor of lots 1 through 5 in the retained lands. So Lot 3 will include the dimensions of Lot 3 outlined in blue, plus the mutual road, which is outlined in yellow. It'll form a T shape. So as was mentioned, the proposed lots will be serviced with potable municipal water through that proposed internal road right-of-way. The proposed lots will be serviced with municipal sanitary sewers through the Pinkerton and 14th concession right-of-way. The municipal water and sanitary sewers have been sized to service the subject lands and contain enough capacity for adjacent lands in the area should future industrial development be proposed. The stormwater outlet for the lots, particularly lots 1 and the mutual access road, is the 14th concession east branch drain, and for lots 2 to 5 is the 14th concession east drain. A new bridge is proposed off of Pinkerton, and it will be constructed to provide access to that mutual road. Since it requires access over the 14th concession east drain branch, there has been a drainage report commissioned and completed and adopted by council to establish that access. So I want to take the opportunity to note here before moving on that if these lots are created, each of the lots individually will be subject to more site-specific assessments for stormwater, for servicing, for traffic at the time of site plan control approval and when there is an industrial development proposed for each of these lots. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we just provide you with a couple pictures of the subject lands looking from Pinkerton. So you can see that it is vacant land. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we explain the criteria that has been used to evaluate the application. So under the Planning Act, specifically subsection 51, subsection 24, the same criteria that is used to determine whether a plan of subdivision should be approved is actually the same criteria that you would use to determine if a consent application should be approved. So in this case, and as further detailed in our planning comments, the development has regard to all of the listed criteria. Specifically, the town of Essex needs more employment opportunities. That has been confirmed through the growth management strategy that was developed by the County of Essex in support of their new official plan. We have a deficit of 45 hectares of industrial land that we need to accommodate our employment needs for the next 25 years. This development will help us meet that goal specifically because these lands can be serviced, they have no impact on the conservation of our natural resources, and they're suitable and they're desirable for development because of their location. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we speak a little bit about how the proposal meets the intent of the Town of Essex official plan. And our assessment has determined that the development conforms not only with the Town of Essex official plan and specifically subsection 6.4, but also with the policies of the provincial planning statement, which are further detailed in our planning comments. Again, it is important to note here that although our official plan recommends that lot creation proposals for 4 or more lots be considered through the subdivision process, the consent approval process is still an appropriate forum to create these lots because these lots front on public roads and there is no new municipal roads that are planned, as is the case here. The Planning Act allows the Committee of Adjustment to adopt development agreements and agreements in general as reasonable conditions of severances to address such matters as financial contributions and servicing obligations. Next slide, please. So we have circulated the application as is required under regulation to both internal agencies, which have included our building department, our fire department, community services, and our infrastructure departments, as well as external agencies, which have included the Ministry of Transportation due to the location next to Highway number 3, the County of Essex due to proximity to County Road 8, as well as the Essex Region Conservation Authority due to stormwater considerations. And we have not received any concerns on the applications from those internal or external agencies. And we also didn't receive any comments or objections from the public either. Next slide, please. So the planning department is recommending approval of the 5 new industrial lots, subject to the following conditions. The conditions include your standard conditions with respects to the reference plan, the transfers, confirmation of taxes and drainage apportionments. But the conditions that you see listed there that are in red are specific to the application. So specifically, we are requesting that the applicants enter into a development agreement and a servicing agreement to the satisfaction of the town of Essex and the Essex Region Conservation Authority. And again, that is to address such matters as financial contributions and servicing requirements. And additionally, the applicants will be required to install the new culvert along the 14th concession drain as a condition of the consent. Next slide, please. And now finally, we're also going to include application BO225 in this discussion because it is tied to the severance application. As was discussed earlier, this is an application for a right-of-way and an easement. It's approximately 24 meters wide. It is indicated in yellow on the severance plan on the screen, and it'll affect a portion of Lot 3. The purpose of the right-of-way is to provide access to lots 1 through 5, and also to provide accommodations for the water servicing infrastructure for lots 1 through 5. Next slide, please. And again, the planning department, subject to approving the severances, is also recommending approval of the easement right-of-way application, subject to the following conditions: the standard requirement for a registered reference plan, signed transfers, confirmation that all taxes have been paid. Next slide, please. In terms of the committee's options for decisions, if they feel that the applications meet the intent of the provincial planning statement and the town and county official plan, then they can recommend or they can decide to approve the applications with the recommended conditions if they feel the conditions are reasonable. If they determine that they will require further information on the application, whether it's the severance or the easement, they can defer the decision with specific mention of what additional information they need. Or if they determine that the applications are not consistent with the provincial planning statement, the county or the town of Essex official plan, then they can deny the application with reason. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's my presentation.
Jackie, do you have anything to add?
Rita covered everything very well. I concur with her position. We're fine with the conditions that have been recommended. I am available to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Doreen.
I have a question for Ms. Jabbour. The condition for the site plan agreement, given that they'll technically, will there not be each parcel ultimately will require a site plan agreement, does that mean that none of the consents can happen until all of the site plan agreements have been registered?
I'll take that question. So the condition respecting the development agreement is just for the development of the entire parcel. There's going to be separate agreements for as a result of site plan control as we receive development proposals for each site. So it will not hinder the closing of this application because there's going to be a separate development agreement that isn't tied to a site plan application. It is tied to the development of the site in its entirety as a result of the severance.
And thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. And again, so that's more tied to the H removal. Is that correct? Like it's dealing with servicing the development agreement?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Bill?
Chair, question is to Ms. Lasseline. With regard to this proposal, we are to consider, regard for a variety of things. One of them is the dimension and shapes of the proposed lots. Can you help me understand, or the committee understand, what thought was put into, what the research was put into the size and shapes of the lots in consideration for employment lands, given the fact that you have smaller parcels and then you have two massive large parcels? If I can maybe get some understanding of that.
The properties are going to be used for industrial purposes, and sometimes as Marcia's bringing up the site plan, warrants to have different lot dimensions. The parcel 1 is really going to be for land intensive, somebody that needs that land. That is going to be a perfect opportunity for trucking, a large warehouse, that type of use. Some sort of manufacturing that's going to have that need for large storage. 2, 3, and 4 are going to be a smaller, but still they're quite large, right? The lot sizes are 4 hectares for lot 1. Lot 2 is 1.5 hectares. Lot 3 is 1.8 hectares. Lot 4 is 1.65, and lot 5 is 0.8. From my understanding, the lot 5 is going to be owned by the gentleman that presently owns the property. And that's going to be transferred to him for purposes of a workshop. So that's why lot 5 is a little smaller than the other ones. And then the retained portion, once again, that utilization of a larger lot.
Thank you. And follow up. Thank you through you. Parcel question to you, Ms. Lasseline. The easement shape, the parcel facing highway number 3, you have kind of irregular there. Is there a purpose for that, or is that like a turning lane?
That's correct. It's going to be basically to take the large trucks off of this is the concession road and bring it through the private road, and there will be a turning at either a circle or hammerhead or something.
To you, Chair. To administration. One of the comments was that there was a culvert to be part of the conditions for the 14th concession. Is that culvert going to be for each of the parcels that are going to be severed? Because how would they get to those parcels?
For sure, I can take that question. The culvert will actually be installed on Pinkerton Road, where that mutual access road is, and it'll be to serve all of those lots. So trucks can enter using the culvert and then use that mutual road to enter their individual lots.
Matthew?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I had a similar couple of questions related in a similar vein to what Bill was asking about around lot number, the number of lots that are being applied for, and then the layout. But before I ask those questions, it was mentioned in the planning remarks that the previous application, which was deferred, had a different lot. I'm not sure if it was numbers of lots or lot layout or both, but can you just catch the group up on what was proposed previously and what the thinking is around any adjustments that might be part of tonight's application?
Fair. So back in 2022, I don't believe there was a mutual road proposed. So that is brand new. And the retained lands were a little bit smaller. So they have been enlarged slightly as a result of that stormwater management strategy.
There was also the intention of having a stormwater management pond that was going to service all the lots. It was quite large, and that's what was taking up a lot of the lot area. And it was felt that each individual parcel should deal with their own stormwater management under their own site plan. And therefore, there's an overarching stormwater management plan for the area, but each of the lots will have to comply with it.
So were there 6 lots proposed, 5+ retained in the previous application?
That's correct. 5 plus retained 6.
Okay. Thank you. So my 2 questions, which are really related. So it's been explained and it's been helpful as the first industrially designated lands application that's come to the committee this term. I think this is, perhaps a bit of a new item for us. And so it was helpful to hear the staff remarks around the minimum lot dimensions and frontage are compliant with the zoning bylaws, so that's really helpful. It's also noted in the planning report that per item 6.4B of the official plan, consents should be granted, generally consents will be granted when there's 4 or fewer lots. So just wanting to satisfy one of the conditions outlined in the planning report around whether it's premature to approve the application as presented. I'm wondering if it would be customary with employment lands, with industrially designated lands, for there to be some sort of a justification that 6 smaller lots, not all of the same area, are preferred from an employment perspective as opposed to 1 large lot or, you know, any number of lots. Because obviously 1 large lot will permit uses that can't be accommodated by several smaller lots. And I'm wondering if you can help the committee understand how the town evaluates, you know, with the applicant maximizing the value, given the objective is to achieve employment lands here in the town.
For that question, and through you, Mr. Chair, similar to residential land in the town of Essex, we look at intensifying industrial land. So intensification means that we are working through the consent process, working through the site plan process to add more units than currently exist on the subject lands, to add a higher density of use. And even if that's industrial, it's still intensification. So working with the applicants clearly understand the market when it comes to industrial development. They're aware of what their customers need and want. They've done that research for us, and they provide us with the plan, the severance plan, of suitable sites, suitable sizes, suitable configurations that'll satisfy their market needs. So our job is to assist them with the development process, being the consent process, and having an eye to intensification and having an eye to our needs in terms of employment needs for the next 25 years. But we certainly rely on the applicant to help meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw, as well as provide us with the market research to justify the need for these 5 lots, as well as their configuration.
I had one other question. I'm happy to.
Just 1 second. Dan, did you have a question? I'm gonna have to go to Dan. I'll come back to you there, Matt.
Chair, my question is just make sure I understand this correctly. With these 5 lots, the size wise of them, you're saying that they'll be determined of a stormwater management later on with whatever site proposals proposed for that site. And my question is, being that one of them is under 1 hectare and the rest of them are over 1, with one being just over 4, is that going to be a sufficient enough size for that lot to be able to achieve those stormwater managements, given whatever size that commercial operation will be put in there?
Mr. Chair, I think we're going to direct that question to our Director of Infrastructure.
Through the chair. So the consultant for the applicant actually prepared an overall stormwater strategy for the entire site. So what was prepared was, in essence, a release rate for each individual lot based on the agricultural release rate that the drain is designed to. So we know exactly what the release rate should be for each individual property that would manage the storm for each individual lot. In addition to that, the applicants are also supplied a stormwater management strategy for one of the lots to look at the feasibility of stormwater management on each individual lot. And we're satisfied that that stormwater management will work for each individual lot with the use of a stormwater pond on each lot. So I would say that from a stormwater management perspective, it's certainly a feasible for each lot and to our satisfaction.
Chair, Marcia, could we get the lot layout image up? Related to lot layout and dimensions, the other question that I had, and it's in relation to the test that the dimensions and shape, around the dimensions and shapes of the proposed lots. It just struck me that the retained lands, the green outlined area there, it's an unusual shape. Now the site itself is constrained in terms of its overall triangular shape, but I just wondered why there wasn't consideration of lot 5 being at the bottom right corner of that green triangle and having a more regularly shaped retained parcel in terms of future use of the property. If there's any thinking around that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Through Mr. Chair to the Matthew. Basically, in looking at it, the issue was the person that sold the land to Essex Well wants a small workshop. And that's where the discussion of lot 5 came into it, that it's going to be an industrial use. It's going to be a fairly small use. He didn't want a large parcel because he didn't want to retain it. He didn't want to maintain it. And he didn't want to have to deal with a lot of issues associated with the larger lots. Recognizing that it's industrial, you're going to be looking at outside storage, truck parking. There's access from the concession road as well as the right of way. And because of it, it really has 2 frontages, the retained portion. And because of it, it may seem a little odd shape, but it's actually going to serve that dual function of having the industrial use and parking, and it's going to have also storage areas and whatnot. So it was felt that the retained portion was a fine shape for exactly what's going to be intended for.
Questions from the public? Well, I got a couple questions. If I recall something from, this is probably to Rita, from the last meeting, there was something about the county being, with the number of lots being subdivided or divided, it was larger to be pushed off to the county. Was that, am I thinking of a different application? Or was this supposed to be looked at by the county because of the number of lots being divided?
Mr. Chair, there was a question at the last committee meeting from one of the members asking if this would be more appropriate going through the County of Essex through a plan of subdivision. And as was noted earlier in the presentation, it's also appropriate to consider it through consent because there is an existing public road network there. We are not creating new roads. We are going to enter into a development agreement to consider the servicing considerations for this property as well as financial contributions. So it could have gone either or. The consent process was the more efficient process for the applicants and for the town, and it met the objectives of our official plan.
Another question I have is probably to Kevin. You said that the roads, well, Rita said in the presentation, the roads weren't going to change. Pinkerton's a pretty small road and already has quite a bit of truck traffic on it that I don't know if it even measures up to truck traffic. There's going to be 5 more lots, a lot more traffic. Are we going to do anything to make the roads a little bit safer for everybody? Because if we keep the narrow road like they do on South Talbot, quite tight down there. So putting in 5 more lots with a lot more traffic, are we going to be doing anything to improve those roads for those lots?
Through the chair. So we are still in discussions with the developer regarding the future of Pinkerton and the potential upgrading of that road. That is also why we asked them to create the mutual access road and not have those lots front onto Pinkerton in the 14th concession, was to limit the amount of truck traffic on those local roads. As you mentioned, the Pinkerton is already seeing a significant amount of truck traffic as it is, and actually holds up pretty well. So we are intending to investigate that a little bit further. However, that road is currently supporting that truck traffic. So through the development agreement, we do intend to potentially impose some conditions to review the condition and the appropriateness of that.
Anything else? Any other questions? Then I'm looking for a motion. Motion,
I motion to approve the application with the conditions as noted by Ms. Jabor.
by Bill. There's. Yeah, I guess, yeah.
I just want to, as we were reading the planning reports, there was, it was very reassuring that there was a stormwater management strategy and functional servicing report developed to the satisfaction of the town, that the project will be subject to site plan control and that the access road will be privately owned and maintained into the future. Are those captured in the two recommended conditions around site servicing, and do those get captured in the more generic language that's proposed? Thank you.
Yes, actually, we have had discussions with the Essex Region Conservation Authority, and they are happy capturing the stormwater management scheme within the development agreement. There'll also be considerations for servicing and the functional servicing report in that development agreement as well.
I guess the motion's already on the table still, so motion to approve. All in favor? Everyone's in favor? Anyone opposed? Nope, motion passed. Now we're looking at the easement application of B 225. Easement, yeah. Any discussion on that one or questions? Not seeing any on the easement. Looking for a motion?
Approve as recommended.
Matthew, all in favor? No one, anyone opposed? Nope, motion passed. Perfect, there you go. Oh, we're still, that's not you, Dan. It's not you. No. You can go if you like. You can go if you like. Yes. Now we're going to listen to application A 2-25. Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Our next application tonight is A0225 for the property 955 County Road 50 in the former Colchester South, otherwise known as the Kiwanis Sunshine Camp. This property is located outside of the secondary settlement area, and the property is designated Lakeshore Residential in the Town of Essex official plan and is zoned Residential 1.1 in the Town of Essex zoning bylaw, and is subject to a site-specific zoning provision. The subject property is located within the Essex Region Conservation Authority's limit of regulated area and is noted as containing natural heritage features. And the subject property is located within the floodplain development control area. However, it does not contain items identified under the Ontario Heritage Act. Currently, the applicants are looking to permit the expansion and enlargement of a legal nonconforming use located on the eastern parcel, which currently contains a pool and pool house and a bunkhouse to accommodate staff. Next slide, please. The applicants wish to construct an addition to the existing 225 square meter bunkhouse, with the addition being 108 square meters total. This addition will be located 58 meters from the front lot line, being the county road, and it will be 7 meters from the western exterior lot line. The addition contains 4 bunk rooms, a bathroom, an office space, and a storage room. Next slide, please. So here we have the associated site plan detailing the location of the expansion. As you can see, the expansion faces north towards County Road 50, which is technically considered the front yard, as I had said. Next slide, please. Here, just so we can see some elevation drawings, detailed the proposed addition, with the addition being the shaded area as well. Next slide, please. And here we just have an image of the subject property as it is today. And another image just showcasing where the addition will be placed. So this is the northern side of the bunkhouse. And then next slide, please. And this just contains it from another perspective as well. And then from here, in consideration of the policies for the extension and enlargement of a non-conforming use, with it, we found no relevant policies identified under the provincial planning statement that pertain to the expansion and enlargement of the legal non-conforming use. Now, the Town of Essex official plan and the County of Essex official plan both provide policy direction when evaluating legal non-conforming uses and their expansion and enlargement. The County of Essex official plan is currently satisfied as the proposed use does not substantially increase the size of the existing use. It is currently used as a bunkhouse and will continue to be used as a bunkhouse, ultimately covering 4% of the property. No adjustments to the land use boundary is required, and the incompatibility between surrounding land uses is not increased, as the surrounding land uses include low-density residential, agricultural districts, and lands zoned for wetland and natural environment preservation. And lastly, no conditions have been deemed necessary to prevent any potential nuisances or impose, as the bunkhouse is screened from view from the neighboring lands to the west and is adequately set back from the county road and other roadways as well. The Town of Essex official plan is satisfied as the functionality of the bunkhouse does not change due to the expansion, and there's no increase in potential dangers, and the scale of the development with respect to the property size remains minimal at 4%, as I had mentioned. And the addition to the bunkhouse will not pose any traffic or parking concerns within the immediate area. Now, a condition has been included detailing that the applicant provide 3 on-site parking spaces in accordance with the zoning bylaw. These spaces need to be depicted on the site plan during the building permit application phase of the development. Next slide, please. And for comparative purposes, I would like to note that the proposed addition to the bunkhouse abides by the R1.1 building regulations. Here we can see the current regulations and the proposed development in the right-hand column. I would like to note that the R1.1 district and the regulations chosen are specific to single unit dwellings only and not a bunkhouse. Now, as mentioned previously, the site is subject to a site-specific zoning, being 28.1.30, which details a minimum lot area of 4,000 square meters, and that subsection 9.3B of the zoning bylaw does not, which details regulations for existing lots in a residential district, does not apply to the subject property. Next slide, please. So the application was circulated to all internal and external agencies. The County of Essex and IRCA have both expressed no objections at this time. Fire Services has expressed no objections or concerns regarding the minor variance application, assuming that the bunkhouse will comply with the current building code for fire protection requirements. And only one comment was received from the public from Gregory Eiler expressing support for the expansion. Next slide, please. The planning department is recommending approval with the 2 conditions. The first being that the applicant file for a building permit. This condition does not pose a time limit on the respective application and is standard for most minor variance application. And the second condition is to provide 3 on-site parking spaces. And this satisfies the parking and traffic concerns or criteria requirements based on the zoning bylaw with respect to the use of the addition. The 3 spaces need to be depicted on the site plan when applying for a building permit in accordance with the zoning bylaw. Should any issues arise providing these 3 spaces, then they will have to come back to the committee, but no issues at this time. Next slide, please. Now, just as a reminder to the committee of the possible decisions today, the committee may approve the application with or without conditions. They can defer the application if they need more information, and they can deny the application but must state their reasoning. Thank you, Chair.
Dan, do you have anything to add to that? No? All right, any questions from the committee? Motion to approve? Someone's got a motion.
Motion to approve the applicant with the conditions listed.
Doreen? Motion to approve, all in favor? Opposed, buddy? You're good to go. Yeah. Yeah, stay for. I'm glad to see that it is, I am glad to see that it is improving because I was there when it originally was built. And so it's, yeah. So, yeah, it's nice to see that it's improving. I was very young when I was there. Yeah, yeah. All right, moving on to B 125. Ian?
All right. Through you, Chair, this is the last application tonight. We have B0125 and A0125 for the property 4522 4th Concession Road. The subject property is designated agriculture in the Town of Essex official plan and is zoned agricultural 1.1 in the Town of Essex zoning bylaw. The subject property currently contains one single detached dwelling and two accessory structures. Subject property does not contain any natural heritage features, items identified under the Ontario Heritage Act, and is not located in a floodplain development control area. Subject property is located within IRCA's limit of regulated area. The applicant is requesting to sever a 0.36 hectare parcel from the existing 15.38 hectare agricultural lot. The severed lands will contain the single detached dwelling and all accessory structures. The retained agricultural lot is proposed to have an area of 14.9 hectares and will be consolidated with the existing agricultural operation, which has a qualifying home base located elsewhere on 4th Concession Road. The purpose of the lot creation is to separate the existing dwelling deemed surplus to the needs of the farming operation. Next slide, please. Here we have the applicant's survey detailing the severed lots as part 1. Here you can see the single detached dwelling and two accessory structures. Next slide, please. And here, just an image of the subject property, again showing that single detached dwelling. And the next slide, please. And then here you can see an image of both accessory structures and the existing access off of 4th Concession for the severed lands. Next slide, please. And then here we can also see the two accessory structures and the existing there we go. Here we can see where that dividing line for the new parcel will be located, with about a 10-foot setback between the new property line and the accessory structure and in the rear yard. Next slide, please. And then here we can also see the retained land, which is currently being used as agricultural land. It's just cash crop at the moment, and the existing access off of 5th Concession. Next slide, please. And then now for the policies that were considered for the consent application, the provincial policy statement permits surplus severances as long as the dwellings are prohibited from being constructed on the retained lands, which a restriction will be placed over top as per standard procedure. The county official plan is satisfied as the house is deemed surplus and is 20 years of age, at least 20 years of age, and the severed lot is under 0.4 hectares in area. The retained land is not considered contiguous due to the differences in intended ownership. Minimum distance separation formula is not considered applicable at this time due to the absence of a livestock facility, and there is no minimum lot size established for the retained lands at this time as well. The Town of Essex official plan is satisfied as the severed lot is minimal in size to support the existing dwelling and is under 1 hectare in area. The severed lot maintains its access to private water and sanitary services, fronts a public road and maintains adequate access, and will be deemed habitable through a septic system inspection. Lastly, a restriction will be placed over the retained land to ensure no new dwellings are constructed on the property. However, relief is required from the zoning bylaw to recognize the reduction in lot area and width for the severed lands and lot area for the retained lands. Next slide, please. So as a result of the consent, the lot width, as I had mentioned, for the severed parcel will be reduced to 40 meters, and the lot area for the severed and retained parcels will be reduced to 15 hectares and 0.3 hectares respectively. Next slide, please. Therefore, relief is required from section 13.1B1, which details the minimum lot width for a lot in an agricultural district being 60 meters or as existing. And then the second section being section 13.1B2, which details the minimum lot area for lots within an agricultural district must be 40 hectares or as existing. Next slide, please. So here we have the 4 tests provided by the Planning Act and 2 tests provided by the official plan when reviewing a minor variance application. For this, the intent, it was detailed that the official plan is satisfied as it meets all other criteria for surplus severance. The intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained as there's no change in land use and a restriction for the dwellings is placed over top the retained lands. Proposal is minor as there's no impact to the agricultural operation and no change in land use. It's deemed appropriate as there is no impact to density or impact to the existing farming operation, and this is a separation of land uses. And there's no impact to traffic and parking as both parcels already have their own accesses and there's no neighborhood character to maintain and no visible change from the street level. Lastly, this is required to support a surplus severance. Next slide, please. Now, as per standard procedure, this was circulated to all external and internal departments and to the public within 60 meters. At this moment, we have no comments that were provided aside from IRCA stating no objections. Next slide, please. The planning department is recommending approval subject to the following conditions. Standard conditions for a surplus severance, such as a new survey, draft transfers, confirmation of taxes, septic survey, restrictive layer, and granting of the variance. And the applicant has 2 years to fulfill all conditions. Now, one thing you'll notice is that there's no condition that the retained land is conveyed to a registered farmer as the property is already under ownership of a qualified farmer. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then lastly, the decisions that the committee can make tonight is to approve with or without the conditions. They can defer if more information is needed or deny the application, but must state their reasoning. Thank you.
Does Mr. Reagan or want to say anything more? Reagan, sorry. Do you have anything else to add? No? Okay. Any questions from the committee? Not seeing any? Okay, well.
Administration. On the restricted covenants on the retained parcel, is it no dwelling or no structure or both?
Through you, Chair, it's no dwelling. So if they need to put a barn, they can still put up a barn for those purposes.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So that leads to my question. A structure, can that structure have plumbing? Can it have heating? Can it have a toilet?
Yeah.
That's my question. What's the limitation of a structure?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would still have to abide by building code and the zoning bylaw. So with it, we would look at the use at that time. So if it's being used as a dwelling, it would not be permitted on the property. If they needed to construct a barn with a sink and had plumbing, they'd have to figure out the plumbing at that time where they're getting the water, but that would be through the building permit application process.
Through the chair, I guess I'm leading to the question that we see an onslaught of barn dominiums that are being built. So a barn does have heating, does have plumbing, and its conditions as a I'm just wondering, what's our limitations to allow these structures or not allow the structures to turn into the toy chest type of thing?
Chair. So it's important to note, as Mr. Rawlings indicated, that an application that comes before the building department goes through a rigorous process of reviewing first and foremost the zoning bylaw regulations. So in this instance, the restriction would automatically stop any permit from being issued for a dwelling, a barn dominium, for example. In reviewing building permit applications, there are also certain parameters under the building code where the building code stipulates for living, for habitation, the barn dominium be, essentially designed for habitation. So that's all laid out in the documents and the design documents as a part of a building permit application. So we can be, we'll say, we can provide comfort to you as committee members that we'll filter, we'll say, for applications that come forward that have to meet zoning bylaw, have to meet building code. What we can't give you comfort is we call, a term that we call the nighttime contractor, the evening and weekend contractor. We can't, say for certain what happens after a building permit is issued, but we can absolutely confirm that we would not issue any permits that for uses that are not permitted by right.
Thanks, Lori. Looking for a motion. Dan?
Motion to approve with the conditions listed by administration.
Seconder? Bill? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Nope. Motion passed. Oh, that's on the application. Now looking for a motion on the minor variance. Dan as well?
Motion to approve the minor variance with the conditions given by administration as well.
Doreen? All approved? Any opposed? Motion passed. Thank you for your time. You got her. All right, and now just looking for a motion of adjournment. Doreen and Matthew. Oh, okay. Both good.